I'm a senior research associate with the Natural Resources Research Institute, which is with the University of Minnesota, Duluth. And I am also director of the Ely Field Station for the Natural Resources Research Institute. We have, with the funding of Seagrant, Minnesota Seagrant, we have undertaken a study to reconstruct a long-term history of Lake Superior, and that would be the pre- and post-European settlement history of Lake Superior to attempt to reconstruct how environments in Lake Superior have changed over the last approximately 200 to 300 years. So the intent of that study is to, through the use of materials that are archived in sediment cores, to do a long-term reconstruction of pre-settlement conditions to give us some idea of what the background condition of Lake Superior used to look like. And then since European settlement, which was largely in the late 1800s, the industrial and the agricultural revolutions, and the increase of development around the lake, there was changes in water quality, at least anecdotally understood changes in water quality that occurred. And we wanted to take a look and see how these changes have impacted water quality in Lake Superior, the causes of these changes, the types of changes, how extensive they are, and whether recent efforts to remediate condition in the Great Lakes are actually having an impact on Lake Superior. Around the turn of the 20th century, so around the late 1800s, early 1900s, we started to see an increase in certain species of diatom that reflects higher nutrient conditions. And we, through the stratigraphy or the sedimentary layers, we saw changes in the diatom community. And this particular species, known as Olocosira islandica, increased in abundance quite dramatically. And that persisted for about 50 to 60 years. And then we've recognized that around the time when the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement came to be, and that would be the effort to reduce agricultural impacts, there was the concurrent removal of phosphates from detergents and a number of other efforts, increase in sewage treatment in major city centers. And what we saw is a reduction in this taxon, this species, and in turn, quite clearly, a response or improvement in water quality in this massive lake in response to human activities. Well, one of the new questions is what is happening in the most modern sediments of Lake Superior. One thing we've recognized through monitoring of water quality and the biology of the lake is that we're seeing things like chloride are increasing. And typically an increase in something like chloride would be due to road salt inputs. But we know we're not using more road salt. It's unlikely that there is more chloride from road salt ending up in the lake. So the reasons for this increase are difficult to explain. And what we're seeing at the same time are increases in other diatom species in the most modern 10 to 15 years in our sedimentary record. At this time, we haven't explained exactly what's going on. It may be linked to changes in climate, because we know that the lake is warming up and that there is a longer ice-free period, and as a response we're probably seeing changes in the biology because of that, and that may be what is causing the change in the microscopic biology and in the water quality. And so that is something we are currently attempting to figure out. There are quite a few studies taking place on the Great Lakes and in Lake Superior in particular. We work directly with a number of groups on Lake Superior in our concurrent sampling on board the ship, the Lake Guardian. We deal with the phytoplankton and the algal community in the Great Lakes, but we work with a number of other scientists who study the zooplankton, other people who study the fish. There's the benthic aquatic insect community. There are people who are studying the water quality. So we want to ensure that we aren't doing this work in a vacuum. We are looking at all levels of the food web and the geological system, the water system, and so on. And so we can try and reconstruct what's taking place with everything taken into account, because it is one integrated ecosystem and one story that requires all the parts to be understood to really come up with this long-term story that we're trying to describe. The work that we do is essentially broken up into two chunks of scientific endeavor. There is the pure science and there's the applied science. On the pure side, in terms of our work, that would be, doing the microscopy, examining the diatoms, and at the same time looking at the water quality data from the sites where we collected those diatoms and attempting to figure out what are the environmental preferences of the species that we're finding. And that is sort of a pure analysis to figure out how are these particular diatom species responding to changes in nutrients or pollution or temperature and these sorts of things. And that sort of exploratory work is what we consider the pure side. Then we can take that information and move it into the applied side, which is now the paleolimnology, where we are trying to reconstruct long-term condition so that we can help water managers in telling them how bad have things gotten, are they getting better, what are the causes of impacts, and we use this pure information about the diatoms to infer condition in the sedimentary assemblages from Lake Superior. And so we are applying our understanding of the diatoms to actually affect change in management.